The city that once cheered for Spider-Man now spoke his name with venom. The streets that had once echoed with gratitude were filled with whispers of hate. Posters of his face were torn, and graffiti called him a murderer. Overnight, the hero who once carried the weight of hope became the symbol of disappointment. It all began with one tragic night. A rescue mission gone wrong. A building collapsed. Flames consumed everything, and innocent lives were lost. The headlines didn't ask questions. They wrote judgments. The world didn't see a savior trying to save, they saw a destroyer who failed. The cameras loved the story, and the truth drowned beneath the noise. Spider-Man tried to speak, to explain, but every word he said was twisted. His friends turned away. The people he had saved looked at him like a stranger. The city he had risked everything for now wanted him gone. Every step he took felt heavier than the one before, as if the ground itself rejected him. He carried their hate like a wound that wouldn't heal. Each night he replayed the screams, the collapse, the fire. He blamed himself, not because he was guilty, but because he couldn't bear the thought of failing those who once believed in him. The guilt became a chain around his soul. He stopped being Spider-Man for the world. He became Spider-Man for himself, not to be seen, not to be praised, but to feel alive. The mask that once gave him strength now hid his pain. It was no longer a symbol of hope, but a wall between him and the world that had turned its back on him. The nights were long, filled with silence that screamed louder than any voice. He perched on rooftops, watching the city lights flicker, each one a reminder of the lives he had sworn to protect. But now they looked dimmer, colder. He wondered if the world even needed him anymore. And yet deep inside, a small spark refused to die. Beneath the layers of guilt and rejection, a voice still whispered, "This is not the end." That fragile hope, though faint, kept his heart beating. It was the only thing stronger than his pain. One night, as he stood in the rain, lost in his own thoughts, he heard the faint cry of a child. Instinct took over before doubt could stop him. He swung through the darkness, following the sound until he found a small boy trapped in a burning building. There was no hesitation, only action. Through smoke and fire, Spider-Man shielded the boy with his own body, tearing through collapsing debris, fighting against the flames. When he emerged, the child in his arms, the crowd that once despised him, stood frozen in disbelief. For a moment, they saw not a monster, but a man who still chose to save them, even when they had given him nothing but hate. The boy's trembling hand touched his mask. "Thank you," he whispered. And in that single word, Spider-Man felt something stir within him, a reminder of why he began this journey. Redemption wouldn't come easily. Forgiveness would take time. But that night, as the rain washed the ashes from his suit, he understood something vital. Heroes don't rise because the world loves them. They rise because the world needs them, even when it doesn't know it. The news of the rescue spread quickly, but the world's gratitude was short-lived. The same voices that once cursed his name now hesitated, uncertain, waiting for someone else to tell them what to believe. For the first time in a long while, Spider-Man didn't care. He wasn't saving lives to prove himself anymore. He was saving them because it was the only thing that still made sense. Each night, he roamed the city's corners that most had forgotten. Dark alleys, broken homes, silent cries. These became his new battlefield. He didn't need applause. He needed purpose. Every time he helped a stranger, every time he stopped a crime, a small piece of the man he used to be began to return. But peace was fragile. The memory of that tragic night never left him. The faces of those he couldn't save haunted every quiet moment. He could silence the city's doubts, but not his own. He carried their screams in his heart like ghosts that refused to fade. Guilt had become his shadow, following him wherever he went. One evening, he found himself standing outside a small house, the home of a woman who had lost her husband in the collapse. He had come to apologize but froze at the door. What could he possibly say to her? That he tried his best? That her pain became his punishment? He couldn't bring himself to knock. As he turned to leave, he heard her voice through the open window. "I forgive him," she whispered softly. "Whoever he was, I know he tried." The words hit him harder than any bullet ever could. Forgiveness, not demanded, not earned, freely given. It shattered the walls he had built inside himself. That night, Spider-Man took off his mask and looked at it as though seeing it for the first time. It wasn't a symbol of strength anymore. It was a reminder of his failures, his regrets, and his resilience. He realized he had been chasing redemption from others, when what he truly needed was forgiveness from himself. Then, just as he began to heal, the world shifted again. Rumors surfaced of a man returning from the shadows, Vexor, a criminal thought long dead. The very man who had caused the building collapse that had destroyed everything. The revelation hit Peter like a storm. All those months of hate, pain, and guilt, they had been built on a lie. Anger surged through him like fire. The city had crucified him for a crime he never committed. The thought of Vexor walking free, thriving in the shadows, ignited something darker inside him. The thirst for justice, maybe even revenge. But deep down, Peter knew revenge was a dangerous path, one that had consumed better men before him. He began to hunt. Nights turned into days as he traced Vexor's network across the city's underbelly. Every clue, every whisper led him closer. The city was still against him, but he didn't care. This fight was personal now, not to restore his image, but to reclaim his truth. Standing atop a rain-soaked skyscraper, Peter looked over the city that had once adored and then abandoned him. His voice was steady, his resolve unshakable. "You took my name, my peace, and my purpose," he murmured into the storm. "Now I'll take back my truth." And with that, he leapt into the darkness, not as a fallen hero, but as a man determined to rise again. The city trembled the night Vexor resurfaced. Explosions ripped through narrow streets and thick smoke swallowed the skyline. Fear crept into every corner, subtle yet suffocating. This wasn't just a criminal returning. It was a reminder that darkness could thrive even in the wake of hope. Spider-Man watched from above, his heart pounding with a mixture of anger and determination. The man responsible for framing him, for destroying lives, had returned stronger and more ruthless than ever. The mistakes of the past haunted him, but he refused to let them paralyze his actions. The city's safety depended on his resolve, but doubt lingered. The line between vengeance and justice blurred like the rain on the rooftops. Could he fight this man without becoming what he despised? He remembered the woman's words, the forgiveness freely given. It was a guiding light, a reminder that strength lay in rising above hate, not drowning in it. Through the city's veins, he moved silently. Every abandoned warehouse, every dark alley revealed Vexor's growing influence. Faces that had once assisted in lies now cowered. Documents, files, and hidden evidence slowly painted a map of the corruption that had nearly destroyed both him and the city. Finally, he found the factory where Vexor had built his empire of shadows. The walls were lined with remnants of the past, photographs, newspaper clippings, evidence of lies and manipulation. Each step forward made the memories of the collapse echo louder in his mind. This place was a grave of his failures, yet it also held the path to truth. Vexor awaited him, calm and unafraid. "You came back from the dead," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "Heroes don't survive in my world. Monsters do." The words struck Peter harder than any blow. The battle was no longer just physical. It was an emotional war, each man testing the limits of the other's soul. The fight began in silence. Each strike carried months of pain and betrayal. Every block reminded him of past mistakes. Every hit was a test of his resolve. Vexor taunted him, digging into his insecurities, twisting the knife of guilt already embedded in Peter's heart. The room pulsed with tension, the weight of history pressing down on them both. At a critical moment, Vexor faltered, cornered, and vulnerable. Peter's hand trembled above him. He could end this man, the source of so much suffering, in an instant. Yet as he looked into Vexor's eyes, he saw fear, not for his life, but for the truth that had been exposed. Peter chose mercy over vengeance. He captured Vexor and handed him to the authorities, along with all the evidence he had collected. It was not just an act of justice, but a declaration of who he truly was. He refused to become the darkness he had fought against. The city slowly began to see him differently. Headlines shifted, at least for a moment, acknowledging his innocence. But Peter no longer sought recognition or praise. The true lesson had been learned. Being a hero was not about being loved. It was about the courage to rise, to act, and to hold on to your integrity even when the world doubted you. The morning after Vexa's capture, the city felt different, quieter yet uneasy. The headlines praised Spider-Man's heroism, but inside him there was no celebration. Victory felt incomplete. The shadows of past mistakes lingered, a reminder that justice did not erase pain, and redemption did not undo scars. He walked the streets that had once shunned him. People who had cursed his name now gave him hesitant nods or brief glances of acknowledgement. Their trust had been fragile, and it would take time to rebuild. But Peter realized that the measure of a hero wasn't in public approval. It was in the quiet resolve to keep doing what was right. At night, he visited the homes and neighborhoods most affected by the collapse. He watched children play where tragedy had once struck, their laughter fragile yet defiant. He understood then that hope could survive even the darkest nights. It was fragile, yes, but it persisted, and so must he. He stood at the graveyard, gazing at the stones of those he could not save. Each name carved into marble reminded him of his limits. "I couldn't save you," he whispered to the silent air, "but I will carry your memory in every choice I make from now on." It was a vow, not to undo the past, but to shape the future. Yet peace was tenuous. Dark forces still lurked in the city's corners, feeding on fear and chaos. The collapse had left cracks, and the wrong people were ready to exploit them. Spider-Man realized that the battle for justice was never ending. Each victory was temporary, each quiet moment, a fragile reprieve. Peter felt the weight of his dual life. The mask that saved lives had also isolated him. Exhaustion crept into his bones, emotional, physical, spiritual. He questioned if he could continue, if he could remain strong for a city that had nearly destroyed him. But he knew the answer before the doubt could fully form. He had to. An old mentor's words came back to him. "Power means nothing if you lose your heart using it." Peter understood now that strength was not just about webs or agility. It was about compassion, about rising after failure, about choosing integrity when the easier path was anger and revenge. He began helping in smaller ways, away from the cameras and applause. He mentored youth, guided the lost, and quietly restored trust. His heroism no longer needed a stage. It existed in the lives he touched, the hope he nurtured, the courage he inspired. But even as the city healed, a new threat whispered through its streets, one sharper, more cunning than Vexa. Rumors spoke of a faceless enemy who operated through fear itself. The war for the city's soul was far from over, and the lessons of the past would be tested anew. Standing on the rooftops, the wind tugging at his suit, Spider-Man felt the chill of uncertainty. Yet this time he wasn't haunted by doubt. He had learned that true heroism was not about accolades or revenge. It was about endurance, heart, and the courage to continue when everything seemed lost. And for the first time in a long while, he felt ready. The first sign of Specter's presence was silence. No explosions, no chaos, just people vanishing without a trace. Politicians, officers, even civilians who had once supported Spider-Man were disappearing one by one. Fear gripped the city, subtle but pervasive, and the whispers began. The hero is powerless. Spider-Man sensed it immediately. Shadows moved differently now, streets felt colder, and the city's heartbeat slowed in fear. Specter didn't attack with strength. He attacked with precision, with manipulation. The enemy understood the city better than he did, and worse. He understood Peter. Every weakness was exposed, every regret exploited. Messages started appearing across walls and screens. Truth is an illusion. Even heroes lie. The city wavered, doubting the man they had barely begun to trust. Peter realized the fight was no longer just about saving lives. It was about reclaiming the very faith the people had in him, faith that Specter aimed to destroy. Then came the broadcast, chilling and direct. "You can save them, Spider-Man, but first you must destroy yourself." The voice slithered into his mind, twisting doubt into fear. This was not just a threat. It was intimate, deliberate, an attempt to break the man behind the mask, to make him question everything he stood for. The city turned once more. People protested. News anchors replayed doctored videos, and friends who had returned now kept their distance. Hatred returned sharper than before. Peter stood in silence, letting it wash over him. Truth, he reminded himself, was enduring. Lies could flourish temporarily, but they could not survive against action and courage. Eventually, Spiderman traced Specter to the abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city. Walls were covered in photographs, headlines, and recordings. Every failure, every scar, every tear displayed like trophies. A cracked mirror in the center reflected his own haunted gaze, with words scrawled across it. The city doesn't need a savior. It needs a scapegoat. His reflection forced him to confront himself. The man in the mirror was tired, haunted, broken, yet he still carried a spark that Specter could never touch. Peter realized Specter wasn't just hunting him physically. He was trying to make him surrender morally, to lose hope and abandon his principles. Then, amidst the maze of shadows and evidence, he discovered the truth. Specter's identity connected to someone from his past, Dr. Connors, his old mentor who had vanished years ago after a tragic failure. Betrayal cut deep, but this time Peter didn't seek revenge. He needed understanding before action. When they finally confronted each other, Specter removed the mask. Connor's eyes were hollow, yet burning with pain. "You saved the city, Peter," he said, voice trembling. "But who saved me? Who saves the forgotten?" Peter felt the weight of every life Connors had touched and failed, and he understood the enemy was not purely evil. He was broken. Their battle was fierce and raw, testing more than strength. It tested heart, faith, and resilience. In the end, Peter didn't strike to destroy. He struck to save. When Connors fell to his knees, tears replaced rage. "Maybe you were right," Connors whispered. "Maybe hope isn't dead." And in that moment, Spiderman realized the true power of mercy, courage, and unwavering conviction. The city was quiet the morning after Specter's defeat. No sirens, no chaos, only a heavy, fragile calm. The battle beneath the tunnels had left both the city and Peter scarred. Victory felt different now. It wasn't loud or celebrated. It was quiet, reflective, and weighted with the lessons of pain and endurance. He watched as Dr. Connors was taken away, not with anger or hate, but with a strange peace. Peter understood that sometimes saving someone wasn't about control. It was about giving them a chance to confront themselves. Even in his mentor's failure, Peter recognized a truth. Broken people could still find their way if someone believed in them. Walking through the city that had once turned against him, Peter noticed subtle changes. People who had cursed him months ago now looked at him with understanding, even gratitude. Trust was fragile, and some would never fully give it back. But he realized a hero's worth was never measured by approval. His strength lay in persistence, in compassion, in doing what was right despite doubt. He stood at the graveyard, gazing at the lives he could not save. The memory of each victim weighed heavily on him. "I couldn't save you," he whispered, voice carrying into the still morning. "But I will honor you in every choice I make, in every life I touch." This was a vow, a commitment to continue, not to undo the past, but to shape the future. Peace was fleeting, yet Peter had grown stronger. He embraced the duality of his life, the mask and the man behind it. Exhaustion and doubt were still present, but they no longer dictated him. He understood that heroism was not about glory or revenge. It was about endurance, heart, and the courage to continue when hope seemed lost. He visited the child he had saved from the fire months ago. The boy's innocent eyes met his, unafraid. "Everyone says you're a hero again," the child said. Peter smiled beneath his mask. "I never stopped being one," he replied softly. "I just had to remember why." In that embrace, Peter felt something deeper than victory, purpose, and a renewed connection to humanity. Looking over the city rooftops, he whispered a silent promise. I'll protect this city, not because it loves me, but because I believe in it. The wind carried his words into streets and alleys, touching hearts quietly, without spectacle. Hope, he realized, didn't demand attention. It endured, unshaken and unyielding. From a distant alley, someone noticed him swinging across the skyline. They didn't see a superhero or a legend. They saw hope personified. It was not loud or dramatic, but it was real. And sometimes the quiet, persistent hope mattered more than the loudest cheer. As dawn painted the city in gold, Spider-Man disappeared into the rising sun. He was not a symbol, nor a myth, nor a legend. He was a man who had learned that strength was measured not by power, but by resilience, heart, and unwavering commitment to what is right. True heroism, he realized, was never about being loved or understood. It was about keeping your heart pure, your purpose clear, and your hope alive, even when the world doubts you. In the end, the greatest victory was not defeating villains, but embracing the courage to rise again every single day. Final moral. True strength is not found in power or revenge, but in the courage to forgive, to rise again, and to keep believing, even when no one else does.